Imagine writing what you believe is one of the best records of your career and having it disappear before anyone even knows it exists. Not because it flopped, not because critics tore it apart, because the company putting it out went bankrupt the same week it hit the shelves. That's not a hypothetical. That's exactly what happened to Anthrax in the summer of 1998, and it's a story of Volume 8, The Threat is Real, and now the band still calls one of their proudest achievements and one of their most painful memories all at once. By 1997, Anthrax had already been through the ringer. Elektra had dropped them after Stomp 4 for 2, failed to get the promotional push it needed, and the band found themselves without a label for the first time in over a decade. They landed with Ignition Records, an independent outfit distributed through Tommy Boy. On paper, it looked like a fresh start. In practice, it put the band on shaky ground from day one, though nobody knew it yet. What they did know was they had something to prove. John Bush, Scotty Ian, Frank Bello, and Charlie Benante went into the writing and recording process determined to push themselves somewhere new. Benante has talked about how the band finally allowed themselves to try ideas they'd previously been too scared to commit to. Different textures, different tempos, a willingness to let the song breathe instead of just charging forward. Scott Ian has echoed the same pride, calling the material diverse, heavy, and modern, built around a crushing metal groove that still holds up. This wasn't a band coasting. This was a band reinventing itself in real time. It wasn't an easy record to make, though. The mid to late 90s were a grueling stretch for John Bush physically. Between constant touring and the demands of singing night after night, his voice took a beating. He talked candidly about the toll the road took on him during this era, including throat and reflux issues that came with the lifestyle of hard touring late nights and grabbing whatever food was available between shows. It's the kind of unglamorous reality that doesn't make it into the liner notes, but has shaped what he was able to bring to the microphone during this period. And speaking of unlikely allies, this is where Pantera enters the story. Anthrax and Pantera had built a real friendship at this point, and it shows up all over Volume 8. Phil Anselmo lends his voice to backing vocals on Killing Box, and Dimebag Darrell, a guy Scott Ian called the unofficial sixth member of Anthrax for how often he showed up on their records, laid down guest guitar solos on both Inside Out and Born Again Idiot. In addition, when Anthrax hit the road afterward, Pantera brought them on tour, giving the band exposure it desperately needed once things started to unravel. And in my honest opinion, Killing Box and Born Again Idiot are the best songs on the album. Let's talk about the album release, because here's where things start to unravel. Ignition Records put the album out on July 21st, 1998, and almost immediately, the wheels came off. Tommy Boy pulled his distribution deal with Ignition, and the label collapsed into bankruptcy within months of release. Think about what that actually means in practical terms. There was no more marketing budget, no radio push, no manufacturing runs to keep the store stocked. John Bush has said it plainly. The band knew they had a great record, but nobody knew it was even out. Scott Ian has gone even further, calling Volume 8 a lost album because physical copies essentially vanished from shelves after that first pressing. You couldn't walk into a store and reliably find it. It just evaporated. And the fallout wasn't just artistic. It hit the band financially and very hard. With no label support, Anthrax were left touring on fumes, surviving on per diems just to get by night, and it got bad enough that co-producer Paul Crook eventually had to step away from working with the band, and by his own account, came down to needing to buy groceries. That's the reality of what a label collapse does to a working musicians. It's not an abstract business story, it's rent, it's food, it's whether you could afford to keep going. But the album itself was never the problem, and nor is the clearer than on track 6, Toast to the Extras, one of the record's biggest curveballs. It drops the crunch entirely in favor of loose, twangy acoustic guitar, a genuine country rock detour that catches most first-time listeners completely off guard. Lyrically, it's Bush painting a picture of a surface level of relationships and staying numb on purpose. People who fill space, entertain for a night, and get cut loose without a fuss, because anything deeper feels too dangerous to touch. It's detachment dressed up as party song. Critics were split. Some called it a little too cute, almost a novelty, but exactly the kind of swing Charlie Benante was talking about when he said the band finally let themselves try new things and that they used to be scared to attempt. Love it or not, Talk City Extras proves that it wasn't a band playing it safe. But buried at the end of the record is a moment that has nothing to do with any of that industry chaos, and it might be the most important 3 minutes on the whole album. The hidden track, Pieces, was written and sung by Frank Bello. On March 25th, 1996, Bello's brother Anthony was murdered outside his girlfriend's home in the Bronx. The case was never solved. Pieces was Frank's way of processing that grief, a raw, personal tribute that has nothing to do with the riffs or record sales and everything to do with a man trying to make sense of losing his brother. Bello has said he was grateful the band gave him the space to include something so personal, something he's described as spilling his guts on tape. It's a track that stands completely apart from everything else in the record, and has stayed with fans for exactly that reason. Many years later, he spoke about it in his memoir called Fathers, Brothers, and Sons, released in 2021 and co-written with Joel McIver. The book chronicles the survival of childhood poverty and abandonment, the 1996 murder of his brother, and his rise to rock stardom, all while offering reflections on fatherhood and resilience. So how does the band feel about Volume 8 today? Pride mostly tangled with a real sense of what could have been. Charlie Benante has said there isn't a weak moment anywhere on the record. John Bush calls it a dark horse album, one that never got the respect it deserved simply because it got buried by circumstances outside the band's control. Scott Ian still ranks it as his second favorite album of the Bush era. Songs like Catharsis and Inside Out are regularly named by both Bush and Ian among the best of the band that has ever written, and Bello still points to Stealing from a Thief as his personal favorite. This is the band that knows exactly what they made. They just never got to watch it land the way it should have. In a strange way, getting knocked down that hard brought him back to something. More than one band member has talked about how this period reconnected them with the hunger they had back in the early 80s. No safety net, no guarantee, just the music and the will to keep playing it. That's part of why John Bush is out there right now, decades later, performing songs from this very album in his live solo shows. He doesn't want this material to fade into oblivion. He still thinks these songs sound as powerful today as they did in 1998, and he wants a generation of fans who came to Anthrax in the years since to finally hear what they missed. Volume 8 is proof that a great record and a successful record aren't always the same thing. Sometimes the music does everything right and the business just falls around to part it. Now, while Bush and the band were digging out from under the Bankrupt label, the man he replaced was building a completely different chapter of his own story. Next episode, we check back with Joey Belladonna as he steps away from Anthrax entirely and releases his second solo album, Where Did His Voice Go, once he wasn't wearing the Anthrax name anymore. That will be next episode. In the meantime, check out the playlist. It should be appearing on your screen right now. It is the story of Anthrax. I'm starting from the beginning with Fistful of Metal and going through all the albums, and I'll do some adjacent bands such as Stormtroopers of Death and the Joey Belladonna solo years, and maybe a few others. But in the meantime, thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, check it out. See you in the next one.